Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, fellow viewers, depending with which geographical position you are of the world. We are meeting again at another interesting show. Today, we are discussing an act of the American government concerning its relationship to the Zimbabwean government and the Zimbabwean people. The act is known as the Zimbabwe Democratic and Economic Recovery Act, popularly known by many people as sanctions on Zimbabwe. I mean US sanctions on Zimbabwe, not the European Union, because the Zimbabwean government and the Zimbabwean people have sanctions from both the EU and the United States of America. But today, what's of interest we are discussing is the United States sanctions on Zimbabwe. What are the United States sanctions on Zimbabwe? It is an act. In other words, it's part of the American law. The sanctions are part of the American law. As I said earlier on, that it is Zimbabwe Democratic and Economic Recovery Act. The owners of the act, that the American people, they normally say the sanctions are targeted on few individuals, not on all Zimbabweans in general. But I beg to differ, and we should also understand that in this program, the information we are giving, we are not taking sides. That's why the title of our program is, Are They Justifiable? What you will do with the information is none of our business. But our duty is to inform. Our duty is to say facts. Our duty is to dismiss myths. Our duty is to expose realities about particular phenomenon we discuss at this program. I want to clarify some things. It is not, it is a well-known fact that the Zimbabwean government is bad when it comes to respect human rights. The Zimbabwean government is terrible. The Zimbabwean government behaves as if they're ruling a colony. They don't behave as if they're ruling their own people. So there are a lot of human rights abuse, there are a lot of abduction, there are a lot of all sorts of abuses you can think of are being perpetrated by the Zimbabwean government on the Zimbabwean people. Number two, these sanctions on Zimbabwe, the opposition in Zimbabwe has nothing to do with these sanctions. Although they are normally blamed for inviting these sanctions, whether the opposition of Morgan Tsvangirai, the late who passed on in 2018, or the opposition of Nelson Chamisa, the current president of the CCC, all these people, they have nothing to do with sanctions. They didn't invite sanctions to Zimbabwe, as the Zimbabwean government normally say that the opposition invited and asked for sanctions. So these two things are clear. The Zimbabwean government is very oppressive. The opposition has nothing to do with sanctions. But we still ask the question, is those sanctions justifiable? Because here we are looking at how a policy or a law or an act is supposed to be formulated. Together in the studio, I'm having my brother from Uganda, who is actually a lawyer, and I'm sure he is going to help us on the stages which are supposed to be taken when someone is making a law or a policy. So, in short, the Zimbabwean sanctions, since I said earlier on that they are a law, it means the American people made a law to apply on the Zimbabwean people without consulting the Zimbabwean people. In other words, it's an insult to the sovereignty of Zimbabwe. It's reducing Zimbabwe to one of its states. I know America is 50 states. So if you are to look at this act, in other words, America is adding an extra state on top to govern. So uh, do they have the legitimacy? Do they have the right to make laws to govern Zimbabwe? That one is food for thought. Kato Mukasa, my brother, you are in the studio. I've just briefly said something about the Zimbabwe Function or Zimbabwe Democratic and Economic Act. You are a legal mind. Tell us how laws are made. Is it justifiable that a particular country will make an act or a policy to govern another a sovereign state? Over to you, my brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, my brother, for hosting me. Thank you, my brother, for having me today. I'm a Zimbabwean today, so today I'm going to wear the hat of a Zimbabwean. And I'm going to discuss my issues in a balanced way that I don't forget the people of Zimbabwe. Now, having said that, my name is Kato Mukasa. I'm a Ugandan. Of course, I'm an African and all of us Africans, and I'm interested in issues, human rights and politics, governance, and of course, we look at Africa and the economics and how to make things better. Now, on the hot show with Tauya Chinama, I'm a guest and I'm going to be giving my views. And the topic is Zimbabwe Democratic Economic Recovery Act. Now, you're asking me a question whether one country can make laws and these laws affect another country. Yes, it is possible. It is very possible, though it is very unfair. Now, in the politics of laws, there are what we call municipal laws and, of course, international laws. Now, international laws sometimes affect other countries. Like a country can make a municipal law. A municipal law is more of a homegrown law. Like Zimbabwe can make a law that stops Namibians from entering Zimbabwe, that stops Zambians from entering Zimbabwe, that stops South Africans from entering Zimbabwe. It can be a xenophobic law, but your country can make it. So it's true that a country can make a law which is a homegrown law or a municipal law, and that law affects other people entering this country, or it affects the dealings of this country with other countries. Now, the municipal laws can actually affect neighboring countries, can affect faraway countries. You can have a law in Uganda, for example, talk about homosexuality, my brother, that our dictator in Uganda, Museveni, who has been a ruler, not a leader actually, the man is a ruler for the last 37 years. He wakes up with his shabby, clumsy, corrupt, flimsy, ignorant parliament, and then they make an anti-homosexuality law, which law affects not only Ugandans, but also non-Ugandans living in Uganda. And this law jeopardizes the relationship of Uganda and the West, the relationship of Uganda and other African countries, which are not seeing homosexuality the way Uganda sees it. So, to answer your question, yes, it's possible. A country can make laws which affect other countries, which affect its bilateral relationship with other countries, which affects the way it relates with other countries. Now, that is one question answered. Now, whether this is justifiable, it depends on who makes it and depends on the complainant. Now, sometimes I am going to make a law which, in my view, is okay with me, but definitely is not okay with you. Think about a thief. I make a law to catch thieves that come and steal my mangoes in my garden. Now, this law helps me to protect my garden from the thieves, but the thieves don't want my law because once I get them, my law says I burn them alive. Is that a very good example? Yes, that I can make a law. To me, it's fair enough, but to the rest, it's not fair enough. Now, going back to Zimbabwe, you talk about these sanctions. The question we should be asking right now is, why does America sanction Zimbabwe? And by the way, American imperialism doesn't stop with Zimbabwe. American imperialism has gone to Uganda. American imperialism has gone almost everywhere they have operated. They are so bossy that they are going to stand somewhere and say, because we have done this, we have got this law. Now, our own policy, they are called, it's called foreign policy. Our foreign policy is going to affect you. In fact, basically, America runs on a foreign policy that is for America and anti the rest of the third world. Mark my words. I'm using the word third world because that's how they call us. They call us third world. Now, American foreign policy is against us in most cases. And I've been observing that. Not only your country, Zimbabwe, but also our country, Uganda. Now, why do they make these policies? Why do they make these sanctions? Let us start with Zimbabwe. That Zimbabwe has got a harsh relationship between Zimbabwe and America for some reasons. Of course, there was the man all of us know, there was Mugabe, and Mugabe had his own policies and his own stance, which was anti-West at one point. That Mugabe at one point was a darling of the Queen of England. They were so much together when he had just gone to power. They were cooperating. There were so many things they did together. The many visits Mugabe made to England and all that. Now the tide changes. He is able to chase away a few people from a few pieces of land. He wanted equality. He wanted equity. And then the entire West is up in arms against him. I should tell you, I condemned Mugabe at that point, personally, from a humanistic point of view, because I thought it was unfair to chase a Linda Tilly from her ancestral land. Because Linda has been on that land for generations, about 4 or 5 generations. Why do you wake up and say, all whites must go? To me, it was not fair from a humanistic point of view. But again, for the West to keep quiet, when Mugabe was killing the Chimulenga, when Mugabe was killing a certain tribe, it reminded me the name. I'm not a Zimbabwean, but I'm also Zimbabwean in spirit. When Mugabe was massacring a certain tribe where he killed hundreds and hundreds of people, and these people, the West kept quiet because he was a darling. The man goes and does a genocide on a tribe, he kills thousands, and they keep quiet. But when he touches Caucasians' land in Zimbabwe, they all rise up. Now, what's that? He kills several Zimbabweans, they keep quiet. They even invite him to go to their countries and give speeches. But when he says, okay, land policy is bad, they'll all wake up and gang up against him. And what happens? It is not only America, my brother. It is the UK. The UK sanctions.
Kato.
Yes, sir.
Kato.
Yes.
All right. Maybe before you go any further, maybe I just want to develop and help your discourse. You talked about Mugabe's behavior. Yeah, these sanctions, when they're being justified, on account of that Zimbabwe implemented what they call fast-track land reform, which means that taking of land from the white farmers, giving it to the landless farmers. I'm using the vocabulary of the Zimbabwean government of that time of Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, when he became the prime minister in the 1980s, you talked about that scenario is called Kukura Hundi, where people, majority of developed people from Matabeleland provinces and Midland provinces were massacred. According to Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace figures, over 20,000 people were killed. Majority of them were developed people, where Ngomo came from. Ngomo was well known as Father Zimbabwe. And the Western world didn't say anything about it. They were silent. And you know what they did? In 1994, they actually knighted Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the Britons. I'm sure the Americans agreed with the Britons. They knighted him. And you know, being knighted in the UK, it means every UK citizen should actually respect you and should actually call you sir. And I'm sure that the title "sir" in the UK doesn't mean the same what it means in Africa. Here in Africa, we can call any teacher a sir. But in the UK, when you're called sir, for example, when you're called Sir Alex Ferguson, you have been given certain respect. So After Mugabe massacred his own people, over 20,000 people, the war ended in 1987. Then we go 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 99. 7 years later, they respected him and knighting him. So he was, say, property capital Mugabe. They later on stripped off the knighthood in 2008. They didn't strip it off when sanctions were put on Zimbabwe. Why? Because the Foreign Affairs Secretary of the British people by that time, he said, if we remove the knighthood on Mugabe, that was in 2003, it will prove Mugabe's point. Because Mugabe, when he was campaigning back here in Zimbabwe, he was telling us the elections are a war between the Zimbabwean people and the Western world. So they waited a bit. That's why they stripped him off of the knighthood in 2008. And also, you asked me to ask me a question on why Zimbabwe was sanctioned. You said that is a crucial question we should be asking. Surely, the only reason which is being given is of the fast track land form. I'm happy that you mentioned that when fellow black people were killing each other, it wasn't a matter, it wasn't an issue. But when the Caucasians were abused, when the Caucasians, yes, it was unjustifiable. We don't have to abuse a person on account of his or her race. It wasn't good. There was a better way of doing it. Mugabe might have tried to do it the better way because he was addressing an injustice. We know very well, yes, that the way this land was taken from the fellow Africans, it wasn't legal. But these colonial masters, they used it to get permission to colonize African states from their own respective kings, which I actually, that's, anyway, you lawyers, you say law is law even when it is oppressive. But I think certain laws are unjustifiable.
Yeah.
How can a queen authorize roads to colonize Zimbabwe or to colonize any other African country? Then it will be held as legit. Then I also question, how can America also put that act on Zimbabwe and claim that they're trying to help the people of Zimbabwe and tell us that they're targeting certain individuals and say, in my own perspective, I think the sanctions are on Zimbabwean people. That's why the name of the act is Zimbabwe Democratic and Economic Recovery Act. Because when you sanction the office of the president lives and is sustained by taxpayers' money. In other words, it's an insult on, you can't say I'm punishing the father, but I'm not punishing the children. What are the implications of punishing the father? That's why I'm saying, is it justifiable? Is there no better way for the Americans? Yes, I do acknowledge if they feel it for us, if they feel that they should help us for our struggles. As I mentioned earlier on, we are struggling with our government, which doesn't respect its own people. Is there no better way for them to help us than to give some sanctions? Of which the sanctions, we, the ordinary people, we feel the heat of those sanctions. And I doubt if those people who are on the sanctions list, they're even feeling the heat. For example, last year in Zimbabwe, there was a documentary which was filmed on Al Jazeera, which is well known as the gold mafia. You know, when the current government was defending its position, they said we were doing gold mafia as a way of busting sanctions, because they were saying we can't trade fairly, we can't trade legally because we are barred by sanctions. So they said it is a way of trying to abscond, a way of trying to go around the sanction. So I still have the question: does that apply? You mentioned about the law which was passed in your country by His Excellency Yoweri Museveni. I know you wouldn't agree with me by calling him His Excellency. I just have to say that because he occupies.
I agree with you.
Of course,
no,
he occupies the president. So you say the law he passed affects everyone, even those who don't agree. But at least I think maybe there was some form of consultation. And I think despite him rigging the election, he somehow has the right to make laws for Uganda. But in this scenario, the American Senate, the American Congress, making a law for a tiny country in Southern Africa called Zimbabwe and applied. And this has been in effect. This act, I left it to say Zimbabwe Democratic Economic Recovery Act of 2001. This is the 22nd year, and it seems is failing to improve the democratic space of Zimbabwe, is failing to improve the economic situation of Zimbabwe. Isn't it the time that they have to repeal and try other ways? Can we still, because now our government has a justification to abuse us. Now our government has a justification to engage into corruption. If you come to Zimbabwe today, on average, luckily today we have electricity, but on average every day we have electricity from 10 p.m. up to 6 p.m. And you know what our government will do? Our government will say it is because of sanctions. We have corruption. It will say anything, maltreatment of people. So we are saying, is it fair that the Americans keep these sanctions and give the justification to our government? Or maybe they are with our government. In other words, they are not with us, the people of Zimbabwe. What's your take, my brother?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, my brother. As you said rightly, that the Britons or the British use "sir" in a different way, and for us Africans use "sir" in a different way. For us Africans, "sir" is a title of respect. My teacher is a sir, my father can be a sir, my uncle can be a sir. But in the UK, a sir is a knighted person by the king today or the queen yesterday. It's a very big title. And to go back a bit, it's the hypocrisy of these systems. Zimbabwe, my brother Tauya Chinama, I should tell you that the hypocrisy of these governments is telling. The Englishman would use the word that the hypocrisy is smelling and telling. And it's not the people of the UK, it's not the people of the USA, it is the governments that run these countries. The average ordinary UK citizen, the average ordinary American doesn't even know what's going on in Africa. I should tell you, some of them think that Africa is one continent, is one country. They don't even know what's going on. But it's these politicians who normally want to assert themselves, who normally promote this imperialism. I call it imperialism, my brother, and I call it hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. That Mugabe is able to kill those people, 20,000 people. And none of these people in these governments speaks up. It's okay, Africans can kill themselves as much as they want. I tell you, Museveni has killed more people in my country than any other past president. I repeat this on camera. Museveni, the president of my country, the dictator of my country, has killed more people than all other past presidents. Why? Because he has been so much in power, 37 years and counting, he's going to make 40 years in power. But Museveni is a darling of Western governments. And I repeated that on camera. Museveni is being sponsored by Western governments. And they have their reasons. We have been crying as human rights lawyers in my country. We have been crying as human rights activists in my country to say, look, this man is terrible. Look, this man must be halted. But American government comes up with their ambassador in Uganda and say the US government supports Museveni. That was 2021, in the middle of an election. In the middle of a presidential election, the ambassador states and is captured by the Daily Monitor, by the New Vision, by the major news outlet that the American government supports Museveni. Now, a man who has been killing people, a man who has been shooting people in their houses, a man who disappears people in their hundreds, a man who doesn't want political parties to operate, a man who bribes the opposition to be part of his rogue, thuggish regime. I was in Uganda. I was a member of a political party. I was the legal director of a political party. So I speak from that experience. That this man has buffed all political parties in Uganda. This man has imprisoned people. This man has tortured people. This man has killed people. But this man is being sponsored by American government, not American people, mind you, but the government of the Americas. That's why you see I speak tough. This man has been supported by the UK government. This man has been supported by so many other governments. Yet the man is doing the worst to his people. Now, this is the hypocrisy of these governments. And I've been talking about it everywhere in newspapers, on TVs back home. I say these countries, these governments are hypocrites. They support dictators in our countries. We speak out, we get killed. You know? Now, let me answer your question briefly now. Let me go back to that. So I'll show you.
You can go on. I can give you 2 minutes or so, and I'm listening.
Now, now I was comparing. I'm showing you why I have a negativity when it comes to the hypocrisy of these governments. You see why? Even when I know that Mugabe did wrong things, I accept Mugabe did wrong things. I accept Museveni has done wrong things. But when I look at the sanctions, my friend, some of these sanctions don't touch the president, don't touch the MPs, don't touch the ministers directly. Because when you give a sanction and you stop aid from going to a country, let me use that, and you jeopardize the economy of a country, I can tell you Zimbabwe is where it is because of the sanctions of USA and UK. It's not even America alone. Look at the sanctions, go deep, dig deeper, look at the sanctions from the UK government and how these sanctions have crippled the economy of Zimbabwe. Now, when we're discussing sanctions, we look at the sanctions and who are they targeting? Are they targeting the politicians or the effects affect the local man, the local woman? Now, if a sanction is going to kill the economy, if a sanction is going to make Zimbabwean money so useless that around time people must have, they call it what? A wheelbarrow of money to go and buy a loaf of bread. I was seeing photos sometime back that someone must have a wheelbarrow of money to go and buy a loaf of bread. Honestly, you have killed this economy. You think you are fighting Mugabe? You are not fighting Mugabe. You are basically ruining the lives of Zimbabweans. So I've been always asking in conclusion, if you want to affect Museveni and these thieves and these ministers, why do you affect the innocent Ugandan? Why do you affect the innocent Zimbabwean? If you want to affect, to attack Mugabe, why don't you develop a sanction that exactly attacks Mugabe? Now, if it's so hard to isolate Mugabe and attack him as an individual and as a family with his ministers, why don't you forget about sanctions? Because right now, as I conclude, in Zimbabwe, everything that goes wrong, they say, you see, Americans sanction us. That's why we don't have electricity. It gives chance for corruption to thrive. You get it? Now, in Uganda, as I conclude again, we have sanctions, so-called sanctions, and I've been writing about them in my research book, where the American government, it's a hypocrite. I call that government a government of hypocrites. That government of hypocrites have targeted army generals, it has targeted ministers, yet at the same time, these ministers already have their children schooling in Europe, their children schooling in the US. Their families are in the US, their properties are in the US, but they are telling us, oh, we have sanctioned them, they cannot travel. What does it change when his entire family is there? What does it change when his only children are studying in Europe? And you say, we have sanctioned them, they cannot travel. So if the man stays here and his entire family is in your country, what have you sanctioned? Back to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. We're reflecting on sanctions in Zimbabwe in relation to our government normally accuses the opposition of having invited the sanctions, which doesn't make sense because I'm sure with how big the American government is, cannot be controlled by an opposition party in Zimbabwe. And on the other end also, the opposition in Zimbabwe, majority of opposition people in Zimbabwe, they lack probably what we call patriotism. They can't challenge the sanctions publicly. They seem as if they are supporting the sanctions. And I think, I don't know what can we say? Because nowadays, the American government can justify the sanctions, sometimes saying the opposition saying the sanctions should remain, they shouldn't go, and they start to mention the things like there is abduction in Zimbabwe, but I doubt if they are keeping these sanctions merely on account of protecting us, the local people. I doubt that. And another issue, when this Western world wanted Mugabe to go, in 2017, when we had a new president, some they called the way he came into power, some they called it a coup, some they didn't call it a coup. And you know who did the PR for this current government? The BBC was the first to report that there is military assisted transition in Zimbabwe. So it seems sanctions and whatever is being done on us is being meant to keep us in a certain way fighting. Because of sanctions, political actors in Zimbabwe, they won't agree. Because the ruling party, that is the government, and the opposition cannot agree on their position on sanctions. But I think even the opposition should actually be against the sanctions, and the government should also be against the sanctions in a way which is proving, since the American government is saying the sanction in Zimbabwe on account of human rights abuse, let our government shame the American government by respecting its own people. But unfortunately, our government cannot respect its own people. So we are a divided nation. We look forward to get solutions outside. And I think as Zimbabweans, as long we have this same situation we have, we are doomed and we shall remain the same even in the next 100 years. Due to these sanctions, I'm sure there are some people who have lost opportunities. Due to misgovernance of this government, you know, the impact which is being caused by sanctions to our economy, though they are not solely responsible, but they're making the condition worse. So I'm calling my fellow brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe to reflect whether sanctions are justifiable or not. What I'm simply doing here is trying to reflect together with other people so that they can make their own informed decisions. Because nowadays in Zimbabwe, your position on sanctions can be used to designate to a political party. For example, if you say you are against sanctions, you can say you belong to ZANU-PF, which is the ruling party. If you say you are for sanctions, you can say you are for opposition, probably most of the time, maybe you will be associated with the Triple C, the main opposition. So now we need a level-headed Zimbabwe who actually reason with Zimbabwe at heart, not partisan interest. So when we reason with the Zimbabwe at heart, are sanctions justifiable? Is that act which was formulated by the Senate, by the Congress of the United States, should it apply to us? Isn't it not an insult to us? How can we engage the United States?
Can I put in something there, my brother? Can I put in something there quickly?
Yeah, now, you can go ahead.
I have explained it from two angles. You are explaining it from one angle. I'm saying that it's not only the American government sanctions Zimbabwe, it is in fact the UK government sanctioning Zimbabwe. Two strong governments are sitting on this baby, sanctioning this baby. Two strong governments in the world. The strongest government and the strongest government. The UK government is powerful, all powerful, and the American government is all powerful. Now, two most powerful governments in the world are sitting on a baby called Zimbabwe. Don't even talk about America alone. The UK itself is involved. Now, let me read for you here quickly how they summarize their sanctions. And I always call them hypocrites. These governments are hypocritically asserting themselves on the rights of people in Africa, but they pretend that they're actually promoting human rights. When you read online about these sanctions, the first byline they give, they say, these sanctions are meant to promote democracy. These sanctions are meant to stop human rights abuses in these countries. They give you a cover which is perfect. Me as a lawyer, me as a human rights lawyer, I say, oh, we need these sanctions because they are telling us on the surface that they are meant to streamline human rights. They are meant to streamline the economy. They are meant to affect the dictators. This is what they sell to you, the gullible, not to you, of course. For a reader who doesn't think deeper, when you read the preamble of the sanction, they're telling you, oh, why these sanctions? They even say, we don't target Zimbabweans. No, we are targeting the dictators of Zimbabwe. We are targeting the corrupt of Zimbabwe. Here they have mentioned 17 names. I won't mention on this TV of Zimbabwe. They are mentioning 17 people of Zimbabwe. I won't mention on this TV because it's not my business. Let me summarize for you what they call the sanctions. Number one, they say that there are restrictions on supplying of arms and related services. Restrictions on supply of arms and related services. Now, I ask a question. Does Zimbabwe manufacture guns? Does Zimbabwe manufacture guns? I ask a question as I go to restriction number 2. Do you manufacture guns in Zimbabwe?
No, Zimbabwe doesn't. Zimbabwe doesn't.
Now, the first restriction is, I want to show you how the hypocrisy of these governments. The first restriction is that they are controlling, they are restricting supply of arms and related services. Now, the question is, who supplies arms to Africa? Who supplies related services? Services to kill. I go to the industry of death. The theater of death is the arms. We don't make these arms, we don't make these guns, we don't even make these bullets. In fact, Uganda just began making bullets a few years ago. Otherwise, we buy all our weapons from where? From Asia? From where? From Israel? From where? From Europe. They supply us all these guns. Now they are saying that they want to restrict the supply. Now the question is, who is the main supplier of guns in Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa? The answer is USA. Anyone can Google it. Who are the main suppliers of guns to Africa? USA, Russia, Israel. Now, and these people sanction themselves. And these people sanction themselves. Now, you have a company in USA that makes guns and sells them to Africa, and you say, oh, we are going to restrict them from selling these guns to Zimbabwe, yet the same country is selling guns to Zambia. The same country, the same company, not country, the same company is selling weapons to Uganda. And you think they can't sell weapons to Uganda and they cross to Zimbabwe? When they see you with the head, they think it's a basket, you don't reason. So they end up giving you these reasons. They think all of us are dull, we don't think. Number 2 of the restrictions. Restrictions on providing assets of designated persons or entities. Restrictions on providing assets to designated persons or entities. This is very interesting. They say that they are going to restrict assets of the 17 Zimbabweans I won't mention, but here I have their names. 17 Zimbabweans, that they are going to restrict their assets so that they don't have money. The question is, these 17 Zimbabweans we have restricted, where are their assets? Are they in Zimbabwe? No. If they're in Zimbabwe, it may be about 20%. Their assets are in Asia, their assets are in Europe, their assets are in the very USA. a hypocritical government. Now, before you restrict the assets I have in a poor Zimbabwe, the question is, have you embargoed, have you restricted the assets I have in your country? If I bought a house in your country, have you shown us where this house is and say, okay, now we have got this house. It was for a man called Tauya Chinama, the most corrupt man in Zimbabwe. We have got this house, you are selling it, and we are sending money back to Zimbabwe. Have they ever done that? Tell me, before I go to number 3, have you ever had that any Zimbabwean politician who has assets abroad, these assets we have got and sold and the money given back to Zimbabwe? I'm asking that question.
I never. Actually, I think the Europeans made a bank for corruption, Swiss bank, where a politician can steal and store billions and billions, and no one else can retrieve that money from there. Only the owner. Yes. Just imagine how they encourage corruption in our country.
Thank you, sir. Why do I take labor? Why do I labor to explain these things on TV? I want to show you how corrupt, how hypocritical these governments are in the West. As a lawyer in Uganda, for all these years I've been in Uganda, I've been saying these very things, and they hate you for speaking the truth, that these governments are corrupt, and these governments promote corruption in Africa. This is what Nadipo was saying yesterday. Now, you pretend to stop assets, these people from having assets, yet these very people have assets in your own countries. Yet at no one point have you ever told us that the assets of Muhwezi in Uganda, which are in country X in Europe, were actually got and sold, and money is sent back to Uganda to build a road. Never will we hear that. Why? Because these monies help them in these countries. Because these assets are in these countries, therefore, partly they form the economy's wealth. You get it, my brother, Tauya Chinama. When I steal money from Uganda and I invest in Zimbabwe, you are going to love me more. One, the money which should have helped Uganda is now in Zimbabwe. I have business in Zimbabwe. I have provided jobs in Zimbabwe, yet it would have been jobs in Uganda. Now, will you touch me? You want me? In fact, you're going to encourage me to steal more so that I invest in Zimbabwe. Simple mathematics. These countries promote corruption in Africa. Why? By protecting the corrupt and their assets and pretending that they are fighting corruption. Number 4 of the sanctions. Listen, how hypocritical these countries are. Number 4, they say that they are going to freeze the assets, which I've told you they have never freezed these assets. They have never. These are hypocrites. They have never done any freezing as far as I remember. If they've ever done so, let them show us. If they freeze these assets, where did the money go? Up to now, I've been asking. Mobutu stole from Zimbabwe, from Zaire, and they said his assets was frozen. I want these people to tell us, where did they put the money from the assets of Mobutu? Where did they put the money from the assets of Mobutu, which are all over the world? Let them tell us. Number 4, they talk about travel bans as a restriction. My friend, they have done that to Uganda, and these are hypocrites. I always call them hypocrites. Now, these hypocrites say that they have restricted travel bans to certain army generals in Uganda, to certain ministers in Uganda, and to certain MPs in Uganda. At the same time, they allow their family members to travel. Okay? Now, Tauya Chinama, you have stopped me from going to Zimbabwe, but my uncle can come, my wife can come, my children can come, everyone else can come. Now, if I wanted to bring money to Zimbabwe, I'm going to give it to my uncle, to my cousin, to my friend. I'm going to use them to do what I want in your country. After all, I'm bringing money to your country through my daughter. My daughter is studying in your country, and my daughter is paying school fees. I have a house in your country, but you are saying you have actually installed a travel ban on me. Yet all my children, my family, my relatives, my wives, every one of my own is in your country, but you are saying you have restricted me from traveling to your country. What do I want from your country in the first place, when every one of mine is in your country? and they're doing business well. I can stay in my country and I can still do whatever I want in your country. That's hypocrisy of these countries. Number 4 of their hopeless restrictions, sanctions on permits. Does it make sense to make these sanctions on permits? Permits, trade permits, who is affected? Work permits, who is affected? The common man of Zimbabwe is affected. So when you look at all these sanctions these governments do to Africa, they are basically promoting corruption. They are basically aiding and abetting corruption. They are basically promoting dictators in Africa. I repeat this on TV. These sanctions do not help Africa. These are hypocritical sanctions. They are meant to enrich the people who claim to sanction our government. So I repeat and I conclude, these sanctions are gimmicks, political gimmicks, to help these countries benefit more from the corruption in Africa. In fact, these sanctions only affect the common man. There is no power in Zimbabwe. Your economy has been sinking for the last 15 years. Your economy is doing so worse. Why? Sanctions. And then they pretend in their preamble to say, oh, we don't affect Zimbabweans, we are only affecting politicians. No, they are liars. Sanctions affect the common man than the politician. That's my submission, sir.
Thank you very much, my brother, for helping me to reflect together on the American sanctions on Zimbabwe. Why I was insisting on America than on the UK, the law we were discussing, ZIDERA, was actually passed by the Congress. But I know whatever being passed by the American government is the backing of the United Kingdom's government, even before they pass something. Those are literally good friends. And it's now up to Zimbabweans to reflect further and continue the conversation around this issue. Can we choose to continue to suffer, or we choose to be better people? And I also want to take this opportunity to tell our viewers that this show of ours, this Sunday show of ours, it has a name now, Hot Eyes Show, and I hope you will be experiencing the heat of the frozen fire. some contradiction, but philosophical terms being said there. And I hope you will be with us next Sunday, because next Sunday we want to discuss the role of creationism and evolution in the education system of Zimbabwe. Because majority of people, they think biological evolution is a myth, and they think creationism is a reality. So I'm gonna be with one of the teachers in Zimbabwe, Mkolis Masuku, who teaches physics. So you'll be with us, and I'm sure Kato, you'll be glad to be with us, and all those who be interested can watch us live on YouTube, live on Facebook, or wherever. But for today, we end here. Thank you very much. Stay happy. Enjoy your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I want to encourage people to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is Humanist TV Africa. Please subscribe. Dennis, may you please give us that byline? That is Humanist TV Africa. Please subscribe. Thank you so much, the host, Tauya Chinama. I'm Kato Mukasa. Stay well, stay safe and positive. Goodbye.